They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from blood. I used to think that was just something you read in old history books. Romans stabbing Caesars, brothers poisoning kings. But then I lived long enough to see it breathing in my own house. My name's Walter Kane, 74, retired history teacher from Chicago. My hands shake when I write now, but my memory's sharp as glass. I live with my wife, Margaret. 50 years we've been together. She's the one steady light in this whole storm. Without her, I'd already be buried. The first crack came with a phone call. It was late, winter pressing against the windows, the hum of our old radiator filling the silence. Margaret was knitting on the couch. I was reading some nonsense about World War II in the paper when the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out. Mr. Kane. The voice was smooth, professional. This is Daniel Reese from Lakeside Trust Bank. We need to confirm some recent property transfers under your name. Property transfers? My chest tightened. What property? Your residence, sir. And 2 rental lots in Oak Park. According to our records, you signed the deeds over last month. The room went quiet. I looked at Margaret. She was staring at me, needles frozen in her hands. I never signed any damn thing, I said, my voice low. Sir, we have your signature on file. All documents processed through an attorney's office. Kane, Whitford and Associates. Margaret dropped her knitting. Walter, she whispered. I hung up without another word. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from rage. That night, I pulled every file from the drawer in my study. Deeds, tax statements, insurance policies. Everything I'd kept in order for years. Margaret sat beside me, her hand on mine, steadying the shakes. And there it was. Photocopies of transfer papers, dated 6 weeks ago. My name scrawled across them in perfect cursive. My signature. But I hadn't written it. Someone had forged me so well that even I had to look twice. Who would do this? Margaret asked. Her voice was thin, frightened. I didn't answer. I already had a shadow in my mind. Our daughter, Emily. She worked at a law firm, Whitford and Associates. The same name the banker had said. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. At first, I tried to push the thought away. Emily had always been ambitious, always looking for a shortcut. But she was still my little girl, the one who used to tug my sleeve when she was scared of storms, the one Margaret and I scraped pennies to send through law school. But the next morning proved my fears weren't just paranoia. Margaret found an envelope slipped under our door. No return address. Inside, a single piece of paper. A printed transcript of a recorded phone call. It was Emily's voice. I'd know it anywhere. He's already old. Soon he won't even notice. Once it's all transferred, we can finally breathe. Dad's house, his accounts, will be secure. He doesn't need it anymore. Margaret's hand went to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. I felt something colder than grief settle in my chest. Betrayal. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife deeper, the phone rang again that evening. This time, a voice I hadn't heard in years. Dad? It's Jack. My son. The one who'd stormed out 15 years ago after we fought over his debts. We hadn't spoken since. Jack. My voice cracked. Listen, Dad, he said quickly. You need to be careful. Emily isn't what you think. She and her husband, they're setting you up. They want everything. They're planning to declare you incompetent, ship you off somewhere, and take the house. Don't trust her. I stared at Margaret, her eyes wide with fear. I wanted to believe Jack was lying, stirring up trouble like always. But the forged papers, the transcript, the bank call, truth was already sitting heavy in the room with us. Margaret squeezed my hand. Walter, what are we going to do? I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. We're going to play along. Let them think we're weak. Let them think we're blind. And when the time comes, I looked at the photograph of our family on the mantel, smiles frozen from years ago, all of us together before the rot set in. We'll remind them who taught them history. Empires fall from within, and I'll be damned if I let mine be stolen without a fight. Margaret always said patience was my sharpest weapon. When I taught history, I'd tell my students, empires don't collapse in a single day. They rot slowly, until one push sends the whole thing tumbling. Now, I had to practice what I preached. Emily thought she had already buried me. Jack thought he'd risen from the ashes to save me. But I wasn't anyone's victim. I was the fire about to test which of them could stand the heat. The first step was simple: look weaker than I really was. At Sunday dinner, Emily arrived all smiles, her husband right behind her. Roast chicken on the table, Margaret fussing with the gravy, everything looking normal. But I saw the way Emily studied me, the way her eyes lingered on my shaking hands when I poured water. "Dad," she said, her tone syrupy sweet, "have you thought about putting some things in order? You know, just in case. It might give you peace of mind." Margaret's fork froze midair. I chewed slowly, pretending not to notice the tension. "What things, sweetheart?" "Oh, just little things," she replied too quickly. "Papers, property, accounts. We could help. It would make everything easier for Mom, too." I gave her the look of a tired old man, confused, docile. "That might be wise. Maybe you could draft something up?" Her smile widened just enough for me to see the wolf beneath the lipstick. That night, Margaret and I sat in the kitchen. She was trembling, clutching my arm. "Walter, we can't let her." I pressed my finger to her lips. "We won't. But if she wants me to sign papers, I'll sign, just not the ones she thinks." The second step was gathering proof. That's where Jack came in. He met me in a dingy cafe by the rail yard, put up like a criminal. He looked older than his years, but the desperation was the same as the night he'd left. "Dad," he whispered, leaning in, "I've seen the documents. Emily's been meeting with a judge. They want to have you declared legally incompetent. It's already in motion." I sipped my coffee, watching him squirm. "And you're telling me this because?" He rubbed his hands, eyes darting. "Because I don't want to see you ruined. And because if she wins, I get nothing either." There it was. The truth. My children weren't protecting me. They were circling like vultures, fighting over which would get the choicest scraps. "Then help me," I said. "Give me copies of everything. Every forged signature, every meeting, every email. You still know how to dig where you don't belong, don't you, Jack?" He smirked faintly, shame flickering in his eyes. "I can get you what you need. But Dad, once you see it all, you'll wish you hadn't." 3 days later, an envelope slid under my door. No return address. Inside, bank transfers, property deeds, even a draft of a guardianship petition with my name on it. Emily's signature gleamed on the bottom. Margaret gasped as she read. "She wants the court to take you away from me." I folded the papers carefully, sliding them into my own manila folder. "No, Maggie. She wants the court to believe I'm already gone, that I'm too weak to fight back." She grabbed my hand. "What are we going to do?" I looked at her, the woman who'd stood beside me through every battle, every storm. "We're going to let them dig the grave. And when it's ready," I tapped the stack of documents, "we'll bury them in it instead." Because the Kane family empire was rotting from the inside, and I was ready to be the push that made it fall. You don't rush a fire. You feed it until it takes on a life of its own. That's how I treated Emily and Jack. Let them believe the flames weren't coming until they were already inside the house. The first move had to be public. Not in a courtroom, not yet, but somewhere their masks would start to slip. So I chose Sunday service. The church has always been Margaret's safe haven. Small parish, old pews, the kind where everyone knows everyone else. Emily made a habit of escorting us there recently, an angelic daughter with her arm around her frail father. People whispered about her devotion. That morning, as Pastor Lewis spoke about honesty and family, I stood up. Margaret tried to tug me back down, her fingers shaking, but I shook my head. My voice carried in that quiet hall, sharper than the bells outside. "Honesty," I said, "isn't just about what you say. It's about what you steal while smiling at the people you love." All eyes turned to me. Emily's smile froze, her knuckles whitening on her Bible. "I'm old," I continued, but I'm not blind. And I know when my name has been signed to papers I never touched. A murmur rippled through the pews. I could see Brian, Emily's husband, stiffen. She reached for my arm. Dad, please sit down. You're tired. But I wasn't tired. I was alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I may be weak, I said, but my memory is strong. Strong enough to remember whose law office those papers passed through. Strong enough to know which daughter of mine smiled at her father while quietly selling him piece by piece. Gasps filled the air. Emily's face flushed scarlet, then white. I sat down slowly, heart pounding. Pastor Lewis stammered, tried to return to his sermon, but the whispers didn't stop. That was the first crack. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was trembling, but not from fear, from fury. Why would you humiliate me like that? She hissed. Humiliate you? I said evenly. I only told the truth. If the truth humiliates you, that's not my fault. You don't know what you're dealing with, she snapped. You're sick. You're confused. You'll regret this. I hung up before she could finish. That night, Jack showed up unannounced, pacing in our kitchen like a trapped animal. Dad, you're playing with fire. Emily's furious. She thinks you're turning the community against her. Good, I said. Let her feel the heat. Jack ran a hand through his thinning hair. She's not backing down. She's already meeting with the judge. You might have shaken her today, but if she files that guardianship petition, it's over. Margaret set down her teacup, voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Not if the court sees who she really is. Jack scoffed. And how do you plan to do that? I pulled the envelope he'd given me earlier from the drawer. Bank transfers, deeds, signatures. I tapped them one by one. By showing them she's not just greedy. She's reckless. And reckless people always leave trails. Jack stared at me, then laughed bitterly. You haven't changed, Dad. You act like you're lecturing a classroom, like you've got all the answers. But this isn't history. This is blood. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. History is blood, son. And if you've forgotten that, maybe you should sit in my class again. He looked away, jaw tight. And that's when I knew Jack wasn't just scared of Emily. He was scared of me too. Good. Because the next move wouldn't be a whisper in a church. It would be the kind of blow that stripped their masks clean off, in front of everyone who mattered. If you want to wound someone like Emily, you don't aim at her face. You aim at her reputation. You rip the mask away where the whole world can see the rot underneath. I knew she had an industry event coming up, a legal networking dinner at the Palmer House Hotel. Young associates, partners, even a judge or two. Emily lived for these nights, strutting around like the golden child who had dragged herself out of the middle class on her own brilliance. Of course, she never mentioned the scholarships Margaret and I worked 3 jobs to fund, or the roof over her head we nearly lost to cover her tuition. So I went. Not invited, not welcomed, but I went. Margaret stayed home, too worried I might collapse in the middle of the ballroom. But I promised her, if I fall, it won't be from weakness. It'll be from fire. The chandelier light glittered off glasses of wine as I walked in. Heads turned, whispers started. Emily spotted me instantly. Her smile faltered like a dropped mask, but she forced it back on and rushed over. Dad, she hissed through clenched teeth, gripping my arm. What are you doing here? I smiled, the tired old man routine. Came to see my little girl in action. Proud father, you know. But I didn't head for the buffet. I headed straight for the stage, where the microphone waited for the next guest speaker. Sir, you can't, the host began, but I was already leaning into the mic. My voice cracked the room like a whip. My daughter, I said, wants you all to believe she's a rising star of the legal world. But what she really is the woman who forged her own father's signature to steal his home. The ballroom went dead silent. Forks clinked against plates. Glasses froze halfway to lips. I held up the photocopies from Jack's envelope, her contracts, her signatures, the bank transfers. This is the kind of lawyer you're celebrating tonight. A lawyer who conspires with her husband to strip her parents of everything they own before the ground's even cold. Emily lunged forward, snatching at the papers. He's sick. He doesn't know what he's saying. He's been confused for months. I pulled back, raising my voice. If I'm confused, then how do I have documents your firm filed? How do I have your name on bank accounts in the Caymans? Gasps spread like wildfire. Phones were out, cameras flashing. I just turned her big night into her public trial. Emily's face twisted. No more mask, no more smiles. Just raw fury. You're destroying me, she spat. No, I said calmly. You destroyed yourself. I'm just showing them where to look. By the time security escorted me out, whispers had already turned to shouts. I heard one associate mutter, "If even half that's true, she's finished." Outside, cold air filled my lungs. My hands shook, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Margaret was right. I wasn't young anymore. But sometimes you don't need youth. You need timing. That night, back home, Margaret pressed her hand to mine. You've exposed her. But Walter, you've also made her dangerous. People cornered like that, they strike. I looked out the window at the empty street, the shadows bending across the snow. Good, I muttered. Let her strike. Because when she does, she'll show the whole world exactly who she is. But what I didn't expect was who would strike first. Because 2 days later, it wasn't Emily at my door. It was Jack. And he wasn't smiling. Jack showed up just after dark, his coat dusted with snow, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't knock twice. He pounded until Margaret opened the door. Dad, we need to talk. Now. His voice was low, urgent, not the voice of a son visiting his parents. The voice of a man running from a fire he helped start. I waved him in. Margaret hesitated, clutching her robe tight around her. Jack barely looked at her, heading straight for my study. He shut the door behind us like he was sealing a crime scene. Emily's coming for you, he said. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette, even though he hadn't smoked in 20 years. You embarrassed her at the Palmer house. She's furious. She told the judge you're unstable, that you're dangerous. I leaned back in my chair. That all you came to say? Jack exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. No, I came because she's not acting alone. Dad, she's got people. A judge in her pocket. Bank officials. If this goes to court, you'll lose before you even step inside. I studied him carefully. His pupils were blown wide, his voice cracking like dry wood. He wasn't just scared, he was desperate. And you? I asked. Where do you stand, Jack? His laugh was hollow. Where I've always stood. In debt up to my neck. I thought helping her would keep me afloat. But she's planning to cut me out too. Once you're declared incompetent, she doesn't need me. My stomach tightened. So you admit it. You were in on it from the start. He slammed his fist on the desk. I didn't sign anything. I didn't forge your name. That was her. Maybe, I said, my voice sharp as glass. But you brought me the documents. You slipped them under my door like some back alley informant. And now you want me to believe you're clean? Jack's jaw clenched. I'm telling you because if she goes down, I go down too. We're both finished unless we work together. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. You don't want to work with me, son. You want to use me again. Same as her. He didn't answer. His silence was enough. Margaret knocked gently on the door, her voice soft. Walter? You all right? I opened the door just enough to see her face. We're fine, I said. But her eyes lingered on Jack, full of the same doubt boiling in my chest. Jack grabbed my arm as I turned back. His grip was tight, desperate. Dad, listen. Emily's already filed the petition. She wants the court to declare you unfit by the end of the month. If you don't fight this now, you'll lose everything. And Mom, she'll lose you. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. His words hit like cold water. Not because of the warning, but because of the slip. He said Mom will lose you, which meant he knew Margaret wasn't included in Emily's petition. Emily wanted me out of the way. Margaret? She wanted Margaret broken and dependent. I shook him off, my mind racing. If you're telling the truth, Then give me something I can use. Names. Numbers. Proof. Jack hesitated, then dropped his cigarette into my coffee mug. I'll get you proof. But Dad, when you see it, don't hate me more than you already do. He left without another word. Margaret came in, sat across from me. Walter, he's hiding something. They both are. I rubbed my temples, feeling the heat of rage building in my veins. I know, and when I find out what, they'll burn together. I looked at Martha's old clock on the mantel. The hands ticked steady, patient. Emily thought time was on her side. Jack thought he could play both sides. But time was mine. And when the hour struck, they'd both learn what a history teacher really does best: record every crime so no one forgets it. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. 3 nights later, I found a manila envelope wedged under the porch mat. No note, no sender, just my name written in block letters. I brought it inside, laid it on the kitchen table. Margaret stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder, her breath shallow. "Be careful," she whispered. I opened it. Inside, photocopies, bank transfers, emails, a guardianship petition with my name across the top, and at the bottom, 2 signatures side by side. Emily's and Jack's. Margaret gasped. Both of them. My throat went dry. I spread the papers across the table, each one heavier than the last. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. Drafts of deeds for our house, already stamped. But what froze my blood was the email chain. From Jack Kane. "Dad's resisting. He won't sign anything. We need to move faster. If you can get the judge to push the incompetency petition, I'll testify. Just make sure I get my cut." My son, my daughter, working together all along, pretending to hate each other, pretending to warn me. The whole time, they were weaving a net around me and Margaret. Margaret sat down hard, clutching the edge of the table. "Walter, they want you gone." And me helpless. I took her hand, squeezing it tight. "No, Maggie. They want us gone. But we're not leaving quietly." For years, I taught kids how empires fell, corruption, greed, betrayal. But I also taught them how rebels won. You don't fight the enemy on their battlefield. You drag them onto yours. So I began to build my own. The next day, I paid a visit to Pastor Lewis. He owed me a favor from years back when I helped save his house from foreclosure. I handed him copies of the documents. "If anything happens to me, or if Emily tries to move on the petition, you leak these," I said. His hands shook as he looked through them, but he nodded. Then I went to the local newspaper. An old student of mine, now an editor, owed me a debt of gratitude. I didn't give him everything, not yet, just enough to let him know a storm was brewing, enough to keep eyes on Emily and Jack. By the end of the week, whispers had already begun in the community. People giving Emily second glances at the grocery store. Jack avoiding his usual haunts. The trap was tightening. One night, Margaret sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes shining with both fear and pride. "Walter, what are you going to do?" I leaned back, staring at the stack of files, at the proof of my children's betrayal. "I'm going to let them think they've won. I'll play the part of the sick old man they want me to be. And when they bring the judge, when they parade their lies in court, I'll be ready." Margaret's lip trembled. "Ready how?" I reached into my drawer and pulled out a small black recorder. I pressed play. Jack's voice filled the kitchen. "Dad's resisting. He won't sign anything. We need to move faster." Margaret's eyes widened. I pressed stop. Every call, every threat, every word, they're all here. And when the time is right, the world will hear them. For the first time in weeks, Margaret smiled through her tears. "Walter, you're going to bury them with their own shovels." I nodded slowly. "Exactly. And the first strike will be at the hearing. They want me declared incompetent. I'll give them a show they'll never forget. Because this wasn't just revenge anymore. This was war inside my own bloodline. And I was ready to scorch the earth." The courthouse smelled of old wood and stale coffee. I'd sat in plenty of these rooms over the years, listening to juries hand down fates to strangers. But today wasn't strangers. Today was blood. Margaret held my arm as we walked in. To anyone watching, I looked frail, stooped shoulders, slow steps, eyes down. Let them believe it. Let them see the sick old man my children painted in their petition. Emily was already seated at the petitioner's table, hair pulled back tight, pearls around her neck like armor. Jack sat beside her, a suit that didn't quite hide the sweat on his collar. Between them, their attorney, a slick man with a polished voice and a face made for lies. When the judge entered, I caught a flicker in his eyes. Emily had promised she had him in her pocket. Maybe once. Not anymore. Not after the documents I'd quietly leaked to the press. Not after reporters started asking questions. He might still play neutral, but I knew he smelled smoke. The attorney began, all smooth words. Your Honor, we're here today because Mr. Kane, though beloved, is no longer capable of managing his affairs responsibly. For his safety, and for the well-being of his wife, we request guardianship be granted to his daughter, Emily Kane. Emily put on her sad face, dabbing at eyes that weren't wet. Jack nodded solemnly, like a dutiful son weighed down by duty. Then it was my turn. I shuffled forward, papers in hand, my voice shaky at first. Your Honor, I may be old. I may be slower than I once was. But I am not incompetent. What I am, I paused, let the silence settle, is betrayed. The attorney scoffed. Mr. Kane, with respect, this isn't the place for dramatics. Then perhaps it's the place for truth. I snapped, letting my voice cut through the room like a whip. My hand reached into my pocket. Out came the recorder. I pressed play. Jack's voice filled the chamber, echoing off the high ceilings. Dad's resisting. He won't sign anything. We need to move faster. If you can get the judge to push the incompetency petition, I'll testify. Just make sure I get my cut. The courtroom gasped. Emily's face drained of color. Jack lunged half out of his seat. Your Honor, the attorney shouted. This is taken out of context. Context, I barked. You want context? I lifted the stack of bank transfers, contracts, emails. Here's context. Forged deeds, offshore accounts, bribes. My own children conspiring to rob me blind while smiling in my face. I turned, sweeping my eyes across the room. They told you I was confused, that I didn't know what I was signing. But I know betrayal when I see it. I taught history for 40 years, and history doesn't forget traitors. Emily stood, her mask shattered. He's lying. Dad, tell them. You're sick. You don't understand. I met her eyes, steady. The only sickness here is greed, and it's yours. The judge slammed his gavel, demanding order. But the order was gone. Reporters in the back whispered furiously, cameras already out. My children's empire of lies was collapsing in real time. Margaret squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. For the first time since this all began, she looked at peace. The judge cleared his throat, his voice firm. Given the evidence presented, this petition is not only denied, it will be referred to the state's attorney for further investigation. Emily collapsed into her chair. Jack stared at the floor like it might open and swallow him. I stood taller than I had in years. The sick old man routine fell away. Your Honor, I said quietly, thank you. But inside, I wasn't thanking him. This wasn't his victory. It was mine. And I knew this wasn't the end. Because when cornered animals lose the courtroom, they lash out in the dark. And I was ready. I thought the courthouse would be the end. Papers signed, lies exposed, justice rolling like a clean tide. But I knew my children too well. Emily and Jack weren't the kind to accept defeat. They were the kind to make one last desperate strike. It came a week later. Margaret and I were sitting at the kitchen table, steam rising from her tea, when headlights swept across the curtains. Midnight. Too late for visitors. My gut told me before my eyes confirmed it. Emily's car, Jack's old truck pulling in behind. They're here, Margaret whispered. Her hand trembled as she reached for mine. I stood, steady as stone. Good. Let's end it. They didn't bother knocking. The door swung open, Emily storming in first, her hair wild, her pearls gone. Jack followed, eyes darting, jaw tight. They looked less like my children and more like criminals caught mid-heist. You ruined us. Emily spat. Do you know what you've done? My firm dropped me. Jack's under investigation. The papers won't stop calling. I raised my hand, silencing her. No, Emily. You ruined yourself. I just lit the lamp so everyone could see. Jack slammed his fist on the table. You think this is over? You think exposing us makes you safe? You're finished, Dad. You and Mom both. We'll find another way. I leaned forward, voice low, cutting. You already had your way. Forged papers, bribed judges, sold your souls for pennies. And you failed. Because you forgot one thing. I may be old, but I never stopped watching. They froze when I reached under the table. Not for a weapon, for the small recorder sitting on the runner. I clicked play. Their own voices filled the kitchen. Last week's phone call, recorded when they thought I wasn't listening. Emily, if he keeps fighting, we'll push harder. He's too old to win. Jack, fine. But once he's out of the way, Mom's house is ours. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steel. How could you? For the first time, I saw it. The flicker of shame in their faces. Just a flicker. Then it was gone. Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue flashed through the windows. My old student at the newspaper had passed the recordings on, straight to the authorities. I hadn't needed to. I just let my children hang themselves. Emily's face went pale. Jack muttered a curse. And then the pounding came at the door. Chicago PD. Open up. Margaret stood tall beside me as officers stormed in, cuffing both of them while cameras flashed outside on the lawn. My children, our flesh and blood, dragged out screaming, faces twisted with rage and fear. When the house finally fell quiet, Margaret collapsed against me, her tears hot on my shirt. Walter, they're our children. I kissed her hair, my voice heavy but certain. No, Maggie. They were our betrayers. Children honor their parents. These two tried to bury us alive. She pulled back, her eyes searching mine. And now, I looked at the empty doorway, the flashing lights fading into the night. I felt the weight lift from my chest for the first time since the bank called. Now, I said, steady as a gavel. The empire they tried to build on lies has crumbled, and history will remember them for what they really were. I slid the recorder into the drawer, locking it away with the other evidence. The deadliest fire, I whispered, is the one that starts inside your own house. And with that, the Kane family chapter of betrayal was closed. If this story struck you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments.